All right. Yeah, so last class we talked about self-concept. What does it mean to be a self? All the attributes, self-esteem, all those things. This week we're talking about personality, lifestyle, and our value systems to see how that is influenced by our decision making in the consumer marketplace. All right, so what will we learn? Personality influences the way we process marketing communications, make decisions, and respond to social influences. It describes our behavior, how it's shaped by our values and our attitudes towards time, money, things. Are we materialistic? Do we value our time? Are we more money-centric to some degree? Explain how our lifestyle is related to and informed by our consumer behavior. Are we frugal individuals, whether we have a lot of money or not? Are we very wasteful individuals? We have a wasteful personality. Where does that come from? We'll also look at describing ways that brands become more meaningful to consumers, right? Something that we can identify with, in which case the brand becomes a personality itself, just like the individual. All right, how do we measure personality? Who here has heard of Freud? Sigmund Freud. Who could tell me anything about Freud that you remember the name? Okay.
Psychologist. Not psychologist, philosophy.
Okay, Freud could be described as a philosopher. Freud was not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. He was essentially a medical doctor. He was a physician. We probably really at the time didn't have too many that could be described as a psychologist, as the field wasn't emerged yet. Anyone remembers anything about Freud's theories, concepts, models, mindset, anything about Freud? Freud's a very controversial person, wasn't he? Freud developed psychosexual stages. So Freud says babies have an inclination for sex drive, right? And that our behavior, motivation, and drive is dictated by kind of two primary principles. One is like sexual reproduction, and other one is maybe competition. And we as an organism know we're competing against each other for different things: resources, people, sexual reproduction, processes, food, shelter, etc. Right? So Freud's very controversial in that concept. He developed kind of four primary stages of psychosexual development. So here's just a little gist of what Freud's mindset was. He says, Freud, at the beginning, you have an oral phase. Babies put their thumbs in their mouth, they want a binky pacifier, however you want to call it. Right? And it's to what? It's to satisfy the pleasure of calming themselves down because they want food, they want something. Right? So they respond. Here's what Freud would say as an adult. If mommy and daddy gave you that binky too quickly, right? They were overbearing in how to get you. Freud was like, hey, you may develop an oral fixation. Freud would say, oh, as an adult, you bite your nails, you bite the skin on your finger, oh, you smoke. Anything coming out the mouth for them with it. Right? Freud's like, oh, you smoke. You vape, you smoke a cigarette, oh, you have an oral fixation. How did that happen? It magically appear as an adult or a teenager. You think it did, but Freud disagrees. He says it happened as a baby. Or you say, oh, you like to gossip. You gossip using your mouth. You weaponize your mouth. You like to put your mouth on things, on all types of things. Or it says happens as a baby. In the oral phase, there was something. I'm the still overbearing, dad is still overbearing, guardian, whoever, or the person they give it to you quick enough. It says there's a healthy way, there's an unhealthy way, right or left. Right? Next, so Freud would say, hey, beyond binky phase, oral phase, there's anal phase. From oral to anal. Right? What are you talking about? Right? We got to potty train kids. Right? Very important that we learn how to use the restroom as human beings properly. So there's an unhealthy way and an unhealthy way. if your parents were anxious in getting you to use the restroom, for them to say, oh man, you're anal retentive. That person's very anal. Like anal, yeah. They're about OCD, compulsory. It has to be a certain way. Things have to be clean, perfect, and type A personality. Or you say, hey, mom and dad, they're really, I learned potty training when I was 6. So 5, like, what, that's way too late. Yeah, they didn't really reinforce that behavior. I'm anal expulsive. Wait, hold on. So you can even get your basic physiological expulsory like mechanisms down right now. So how is that? What happens in your life as an adult? You're like, oh, we come look at your room and it's messy. That's why. Because in that phase, you were also messy. You might, it wasn't a big deal. You might, well, that should be a big deal. Book says he could link anal expulsory people to criminality. You might well go through the prison system, talk to all the prisoners, and understand why they are in prison, and then we'll talk about their potty training behavior. Like, wait, hold on. Like, it all comes from childhood, or it's like, yeah, for the most part. Right? Or what even controversially say, man, we say anal phase, right? But hey, we like to do things with your butt. And you might we figured that out too, and in that phase. A disruption in that phase. Unhealthy, something happened. Right? Before it says, okay, now we got the baby, the kids, the toddlers, whomever, we got them, off the pacifier and we get them potty trained, right? You're like, well, what's next for the kids, Freud? Well, Freud's like, oh, we gotta go through a phallic stage. Like, what do you mean phallic stage? Well, Freud's like, well, you gotta understand we have sexual reproductive organs in the context. So Freud would say, maybe you shouldn't be taking a bath with your sister at some age. Maybe you should be taking a bath with your brother. Maybe you start to realize you have organs and start to touch them, play with them, ask questions about them. Before it says anything disrupted in that process of mom and dad allowing you to do a little too much touching, feeling, groping, whomever, yourself or others, Freud would theorize that guess what, as an adult, now you wonder why you are promiscuous, hypersexual, rapist, anything dealing with the reproductive organs of sex. Or it says childhood. Right? It says there's no magic to it, it's just childhood. And then Freud says, hey, after that point, you hit first grade. Alright, you got through the phase, now it's first grade, we're 6 years old, and Freud's like, well, what happens there? Oh, that all shuts off. We go to grade school, nobody's talking about sex. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Or it says, shut up, the latent phase is what it's called. Right? So it says, if you had a healthy rearing, you should be good. You had an unhealthy rearing in any one of those stages, now you wonder why, as an adult, we're trying to figure why people are sadistic and do all this stuff. Right? That we have the answer is childhood. Right? The answer is childhood according to Freud. Controversial, right? So Freud says, hey, there are the psychosexual stages of development. If they're healthy, you be good. Unhealthy, you may have some issues as an adult, trying to figure out why. Freud says, guess what? If mommy is too overbearing and daddy is not masculine enough or not even present in the home, we may fall in love with our mom. Right? And guess what? He says we have what he described as an Oedipus complex. Or he calls that an Oedipus complex. We're like, hey, we fall in love with our mother. Not every woman that we meet may not match up to that. Females, small child in the house may not observe the power that daddy has as a masculine person, masculinity. And they may like that. They may be attracted to that energy or that perception of energy that says we have things like penis in it. Or an electric complex. Whether you love with daddy, nobody matches up with daddy. Once again, another issue with relationships as an adult. Alright, so you say, hey, before you laid some groundwork, you're controversial, but this is okay, you came up with that, this sounds like. Lecture, we talk about those things, psychosexual stages, we still kind of agree with some of that stuff. Freud says, okay, sex and aggression, or sex and competition, he said that's the main driver of most of all human behavior, right? Some way we're trying to sexually reproduce, he says it's unconscious, it's not like we're all some perverts walking around. This unconscious part of that is, which we'll talk about, right? But these are unconscious behavior. So Freud said, hey, we'll go to have a therapy session and talk about it. Like for what? Freud was like, guess what? We have issues as adults and you don't know why. So he's like, I don't know why either. You may have repressed some memories. You know why. But you don't want to be consciously aware of it. So you bury it deep down somewhere in the unconscious mind. You have to bring it out with all this talking sessions for a long period of time. Solve your problem. Like, it was mom, it was dad, it was cousin, it was this, it was that, it was your brother, it was your sister, it was your teacher, whoever. Right? Alright, so how we measure personality, the psychiatric perspective. So Freud came up with the id, ego, superego. Anyone have heard of these concepts? Id, ego, superego? What can you tell me?
I don't remember much about it. I remember that it's kind of I think the id is like the emotional side of like the brain. The ego is a bit more rational in its thought process. The superego goes to full rationality.
Okay, pretty good. Think of it like this. Devil, angel, and the person in the middle is the main decision. Right? So we say it is the demon, the devil. What does that mean? It means that the base level of our brain, we need food, shelter, water, sex, etc. That base of our brain, every animal has. You're not going to rationalize a dog about food, water, sex, or elephant, or ants, or the same would happen with us. It needs that, it wants that, it will get that. Right? That's the id. It seeks pleasure. Anything that feels good. You're like, hey, does wine feel good? It might. You might have a lot. Does killing feel good to you? That's the id. It wants that. Yeah, I feel bad about it. Alright, and then we say, hey, the superego is the morality center. There's something there within the brain that said that doesn't feel right. That doesn't sound right. For some reason, there's something inside of us that has something that says, hey, I don't know, there's something about a moral principle, I guess.
I don't know why, but I was a great speaker to tell me what the ego was. Is that like fed by like what other people say about us or to us, or is it just our own like perception of ourselves?
It can be a little bit of both, right? To say it's never as simple as you think, it's always multi-dimensional, but yeah, it's maybe more so what we think of ourselves based on all the other stuff people told us, things we see on entertainment, movies, etc. And then the ego finally makes a decision. The ego is the person that makes a decision, right? Like, hey, this is what I really want to do, this feels good, but then I don't know, something kind of feels bad about it, a moral thing, a principle or something, a right and wrong sort of concept. And then the ego says, out of all of those choices, right and wrong, rules that man made up, human laws, natural law, I'm going to finally make a choice. Right? That's the ego. Right? The ego is the one that finally executes. The ego is the one that finally acts on it, and what you really can say is the one that finally gives responsibility to your actions, right? But it's also one that creates a self, right? So once again, we say the one that is that perception of who you are. It could be a grand ego, a grandiose ego. The person's a narcissist, right? Their self-concept is beyond the average person, right? They think they're great at everything. They get everything wrong, as everybody gets them, right? We're like, well, that's not good accountability and responsibility. So Freud says, hey, we live between pleasure and reality. Yeah, you want to kill people and you're going to jail. That's the reality. So you better figure out how to repress that anger and emotion. Yeah, you want to steal, you may get caught going to jail again, so maybe you shouldn't steal. Maybe you should go get a job. It's like this balance between what's really happening out in the world, because it's more than just you, versus what you really want. Right? It's important. Past Freud. So Freud had a colleague named Carl Jung, who I consider to be the greatest psychology of all time. Hey, and he says, hey Freud, all right, that sounds a little bit too much, too simple. Like, it's a little bit different. Jung came up with some interesting concepts too. Jung says human beings have a void, typically, that we are both male and female spirits into one vessel, which means that even if you're a man and you are hypermasculine, you're going to have issues because you fail to recognize feminine aspects that are important. Not to say that you want to be a woman, but it's like feminine aspects, which is emotional intelligence, expressing your emotions, like understanding that emotion. And it's on the flip side too. A female may struggle if she fails to acknowledge also a masculine sort of self, right? The energy of spirit or something, right? What you call animal animals. Carl Jung came up with collective unconscious. He says there's some universal things that no matter what culture you're in, we all are born with. Concepts of love, right? Friendship, etc., etc. Love, hate, friendship, evil, good. We just may do it in different ways. So there's a collective unconscious, right? And then we have that. But Jung was awesome. And Jung came up with something we call archetypes. We think, hey, throughout human history, there's been narrative stories told. And then each story is kind of the same stuff. It just depends on the type of story. And one story is always a hero. When we go to movies, we wait for that. Right? The rise and the fall and the rise again of the superhero. Like, we love that story. Right? The everyday man, the person who's just everyday person, does normal things. They don't deviate. Right? All sorts of archetypes. All right, so here's our first reflection question. Describe a time when the id, remember we said that is that compulsory thing to seek pleasure, took over on a purchase consumption for you. And did you keep the item or did you return it after you later thought about it? And we said that super ego, we're like, guys, time to think about it, and it was an impulsive purchase. It was a bad purchase. Yes?
So I was shopping to go to the club, and I saw this jacket, and it was a leather jacket, like a maroon leather jacket, and I was like, wow, this is exactly what, like, I can pop my collar off, feel ready. It was $25 though, and like that store, everything is cheap there, and I was like, should I get it? But I'm like, I have to get it. It just looks too good not to get it.
Oh, in your mind, were you thinking about getting it just like for going out to the club or something? Or?
Well,
Or
I
you
feel
think
like
like
it's not
monthly?
something I wear all the time, because I just feel like it's like when I see like people wearing a leather jacket, I guess it depends on the person. You just like, oh, they think they're better than everybody else. I don't know. That's just how I feel like when I wear it. To be honest, I don't think that way though. But.
Yeah. Like, well, it empowers you. Right? Just like a superhero. Right? All right, so think about that. So we could have this three groups. Here's a group, here's a group, here's a group. All right. Talk amongst that with the group, get closer if you need to. Talk about some purchases, right? We're gonna completely pleasure purpose. Like they're literally just gonna pleasure yourself, right? Just sheer pleasure. But then maybe did you keep it or did you return it? Did you feel guilty? Any guilt purchases? Think of stuff like that.
I don't know, where is it? That's me all the time.
I'm kind of like that. I was in Houston a couple years ago, and I saw Houston Rockets had like the little logo of Nike on it. And I was like, I'm not gonna see that. I bought it. I didn't. Yeah, I got it.
I just feel like I really, really like it. It's hard not to buy it. Especially if it fits me and it looks good. I'm not buying it. What if I come back and it's gone? That shit won't make me depressed. I feel like, all confident. Here it is. No, crazy. I was at Target and I bought
I think it was like 30,
some
35.
and it was like a chain, that like a man can wear. And then I saw it and I tried it on, that shit was ugly. And it was a Target chain, it was not a real little chain. I was like, it was not like, it was unpackaged, like, one of those like, with kind of cracked tape. I regretted that shit instantly. I was like, what the fuck, I'm not trying to get this. Like,
Did he return it?
I was like, oh, I'm gonna give this to some guy. Plate in my iron plate.
Okay, thoughts? Over here.
Yes, I said that one verse that I made the other day, that was a little ID, was about this candy bar. You know, I had already ate before that, you know, I really didn't need it, but it was just like, it was a white piece. And I had never had it before. I was like,
Okay, you're like, hey, you know, you didn't need it, right? You didn't need it, but it was there. It looked interesting. Shiny object syndrome. We say shiny because it's something new. It speaks to us, and you had that. Were you satisfied?
yeah, it was good.
Okay. Anybody else?
I bought like a painting pot, just because I really like the way it looks, and I didn't really have a lot of plant to put it in, so it's kind of just like, mostly one bit without.
We'll see aesthetics.
Just
More-
purely the aesthetic, I didn't have a plant to put it in this time.
Right, so like, hey, I bought a planting pot without a plant. They don't even have a plant to plant it. They're like, it's pretty, it looks good, it's decorative, right? And the aesthetic. Something I do all the time, right? I do that, when I see something I like, I try to like find a purpose for it, right? I like to force a purpose for it. And I end up as, almost coming off as a hoarder, collecting like that. It's kind of like little trinkets and novelties. All right, over here.
I have another one and then I'll let my group go. So I went to Target and I was like, I like their jewelry. It's like $10 for like 4 little chains. I bought a chain, like, it was like, it was kind of like the chain that Mandy married, but I thought it was good. And I couldn't try it on. So I came back to my room and I was like so excited to try it on and it looked horrible. And I instantly
see it on you, right? It's almost a thing with like clothes, it's like, there's a certain stuff you have to try on,
Yes.
right? But you may see it, you just gotta have it, because the price is right, it's on sale, you don't think you can find it again or something. And then you buy it, you're like, oh, this doesn't fit, this don't look like me. And then you just move it, right? Anybody else?
I remember I bought some shoes once. They're Jordan 4s. I just saw them on everyone else, and I was like, oh, let me get them. And they were kind of expensive. I didn't really think about it, like, oh. So I just got them, and they looked okay on me, but now I barely use them. They're just there.
Yeah, think about like all that money, and you're like, man, it satisfied a short-term craving. And that craving went away, and I forgot I even got the shoe. Forgot about the shoe. Right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I did the same with some shoes. For my birthday outfit, I had like already bought the shoe prior to that because I didn't think it was going to be there. And I went to the mall and I seen it, and I called my mom and I was like, "This shoe is here." She was like, "So what you gonna do about it?" And I ended up getting it.
All right, did you keep it? Did you return it?
Yeah, I only wear the shoe once.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they have big, and those are, you know, those are expensive purchases. Like when you really start to calculate all those types of purchases that you like kind of regret and don't use anymore, like that's a lot of money. You gotta take a trip. You gotta take a nice vacation somewhere, right? Cheap flight to Miami or something like that. Anyone else? Yes.
When I was in Houston a few years back, I bought a Houston Rockets hat with the old Nike's logo.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, man, I love this logo, it looks cool.
Yeah.
Not even a Rockets fan, but I was like, I want this hat. And I didn't return it, but later I was like, man, how often am I even gonna wear this?
Yeah, he was like, I mean, think about that. Like, it's just a mental concept of like, man, I really like this item, but I don't even know if me wearing it makes sense, right? And if it do, it only makes sense in this situation. But you're like, in your mind, you think like, maybe one day I'll go back to Houston and I'll have a reason to wear it. But maybe you never go back, right? So yeah, I take that sort of impulse as well too. So now to kind of manage my own shopping habits, I talk to myself and say, do I love it? I don't love it, I can't buy it. You know what I mean? Like when you see something right now, I really like this. Like, yeah, life's not good enough. I gotta like actually love it, right? And then the second part is like, how many uses can I get from this? So what happens is, I think as you get older, to be honest, you start to buy more simple things that you could do all the time. Whether it be a hoodie or a t-shirt or a blazer, something that you can combine with anything, anywhere, at any season, at any trend. You start to buy basic colors and basic patterns, things that have kind of stood the test of time. When you're younger, you buy more novelty things. You buy a graphic t-shirt, you only wear like twice. You only wear it twice because you're like, you don't want people to think you wear the same clothes, right? So it's like an expensive Dolce & Gabbana sweatshirt. You can't buy it. You know, it costs $500, right? It's like, yeah, you play that sweatshirt. Right? But if you get a basic one, you can wear 3 days a week. Nobody will blink an eye when you switch up your shoes or your pants or something, right? All right. Motivational research, we have Ernest Deichter here, and he came up with the Zoltman metaphor, elicitation, technique, or Z-man, right? To be like, hey, what does elicit us in order to purchase or motivate us to buy things, right? And he says things are metaphors, right? We attribute one thing to another thing. And maybe that attribute or that connection is very important to us, very valuable as a reason. That's why we've done buy this other thing. It's not so much even this thing, but it's what it's connected to that makes it motivating, makes us want to have a response, an impulse to it. Then we got trait theory, and we've talked about this before in class. We say quantitative measurement of personality traits which are identifiable characteristics that define a person. We said the ocean. Who remembers the ocean model that we talked about? Right? Yeah, the big five, right? We call it big five personality. Ocean, right? Hey, what's the O in ocean? We said openness to experience, right? Some of us who feels that they have an, let's say, a high degree of openness, meaning that you're willing to try new things. Or you like, nah, I like doing what I just like doing the same old stuff. My friends always call me and take me to try this and try that, but I don't really want to. I like it. So openness, who feels that they're high on openness? That you're willing to try. You will always want to try new stuff. Always will. Who feels that they're low on openness? Like you're kind of traditional, just like your regular normal stuff. So you're more reserved with that type of stuff, right? You're comfortable. Right, so you kind of figure out like your personality combinations with this trait theory. Right, so openness, the degree to which a person is open to new ways of doing things. Example of consumer behavior related to the dimension of openness. Right, love to engage in creativities and risky behavior. Right, person who loves to go do the wine sipping with the paint and sip. Oh, there's a new one. There's an immersive experience. You gotta try it, right? Oh, there's this new thing we gotta go try that. That type of personality. Or even risky behavior. We're talking about people who go skydiving. Anyone ever went skydiving?
Hell, no. Sorry.
Right? But then so you may question your openness. You can say, well, I'm open to a degree, it really depends on it. Right? You say I'm open to creative activities, but may not be open to risky behavior. Right? A little bit more conscious of that. Next, the C in ocean. Conscientiousness, the level of organization and structure a person needs, right? Conscientious, like you're highly aware of what's going on, your life, you plan, you schedule. Someone, not how openness is like a big free throw. I'll figure it out. I don't know, I didn't even think about it. I'm not thinking about that type of stuff, right? Someone very conscientious, thinks about a lot of things, right? It could be very, very philosophical. I think I find myself always being extremely philosophical, almost to like a bad, sort of unhealthy way to a degree, right? I just think as a psychologist, you're so aware of human behavior and environments and interactions and things. Yeah, that sometimes can be a different area. You help people with that. Can't help yourself. That's kind of how it is.
I think you're a good professor.
All right, extroversion. Well, who are my conscientious people? Who here thinks that they're always aware? You always hyper aware of what's going on, when people say the things they say, when people do things they do, the environment.
Yeah, I am to an extent. Like I'm really observant.
Is it healthy or unhealthy for you?
I think it's healthy.
Okay. Doesn't distract you from important.
Nah.
I wanted to say one, but I feel like sometimes I feel like I act like I'm not, but I'm a lot more self-aware than like I make people realize. So it's like I feel like where I'm at in my life, like I'm so in tune with my intuition as well. So I pay attention a lot to the way people are with me or around other people, just to feel how the type of person that they are. So I can be aware of mistakes.
Okay, so you're high on conscientious. Anyone here who's low? Who feel like, I don't want to do that much thing. This is too much. It's irrelevant. Yeah.
I mean, I'm low on it, but I think it's more of like a conscious effort to be low on it. Just because, like, I used to get so caught up in, like, people around me that, like, obviously they're just not like that for it,
Yeah.
So, like, I think after focusing on that, like, now it's like, if someone's, like, doing the thumbs up to the side, like, I just kind of ignore it,
Gotcha. You pick your battles.
Yeah.
And you're like, not everything's relevant. Extroversion. Who are my extroverts in the class? Who's my introverts? But let me ask you, do you really think, tell me why you think you're an introvert? see is important, and I'm not giving them to everybody, right? Because I want to reserve it for myself. Or you're like, hey, I simply just don't like interacting in social circles and with people. Like, who can explain their extroversion to me? Like, what way are you extroverted? Oh, you're not extroverted. Okay.
I feel like my major plays a huge part in me being an extrovert, because like I have to talk to people, interact, and like quiet is okay. I don't want to say like quiet, but like not communicating okay. So that plays to my major play. Like I
Alright.
talk.
Do you think it's just your personality though? You're like, hey,
Yeah.
regardless of whatever's going on, I'm always just gonna be me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of want to get a little deep with it, but I feel like, people that are extroverts are extremely comfortable with themselves. And it's not something that always develops when you're younger, but I feel like depending on the environment that you were raised in and the people that you're around and how they treated you or how you treat yourself, kind of is what reflects on the person that you become or the person you choose to become. So I feel like everybody has a little extrovert in them. Everybody can, be out.
Pull it out of them.
Flamboyant, wait, that's not the right word, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I just feel like people are afraid to show who they truly are because of how judgmental the society is. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Yes.
I'd like to push back on that idea because I feel like when you're introverted, sometimes you feel the need to be out with groups of people because otherwise you're kind of not becoming a part of the group. You're kind of taking yourself away from the group. So like I know a lot of people in the cafeteria, they'll go to like the single tables where they can kind of just be by themselves. And they do that to kind of just avoid people. They don't really want to go talk with people, they just want to get their food and get out. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're not comfortable with themselves.
Yeah. So think of it like this. So if we're talking about social evaluation, which means it may not be our own evaluation, maybe society's evaluation, but people who are extroverts tend to potentially in this society go further in particular things. One is like leadership, which means you have to talk to people, communicate, convey information. The other thing may be artistic things where you truly have to express. But even still, you're kind of right. Like, man, there's a ton of artists who hate communicating. They love the art they produce. But interacting with people, they loathe it. I know several painters who are like, they cripple when they have to be around people, right? They're magnificent in the art they do. Whether they're musicians, painters, recording artists, things of that nature. Now, we as a society may value them as like, oh, the confidence or you're too reserved or something like that. But that may not necessarily be the case for them, right? They're also evaluation that they're fine to be fine where they're at. The thinking is that introverted people actually are more aware of other people's feelings. They're more actually emotionally aware of others. Extroverts, we just come, kind of do our thing, and we expect to get an audience. Not necessarily we'll get the audience, right? So we may not be aware. We do our thing, we could care less who gathered and didn't get, right? But you're like, well, that's kind of sometimes a bad thing because introverted people wait, sit, look, and observe. They're more observant, taking it in, process. Extroverts kind of only processing as they're going along. So pros and cons, but you can't be both. Alright, so yeah, I kind of asked you the wrong question. I was actually extrovert, but tell me why you're an introvert.
I just like to relax more alone, like kind of get more energy. Like I want to be able to move around before my skirts.
Yeah, so hey, main thing when it comes to introvert extroverts is energy. Very simple thing to remember. You have a 100% battery, let's just say theoretically 100% battery life in the morning. And you're big, like a phone. Right? You didn't eat, well, how do I get the 20%? Extroverts have to go communicate with people. They steal people's energy. Right? Introverts, on the other hand, they say, you steal my energy. That's why I don't want people around. Right? They're energy thieves. So therefore, how do they boost their energy back up to 100%? They go be by themselves. And their battery level goes back up by themselves. And then can come back and interact with people, goes back down. The extroverts come back and interact with people, goes up. And I let the extroverts be by themselves, isolated, they'll feel lonely, depressed, and I can direction. Right? Yes.
I do want to say though that obviously everybody has their own opinions and perceptions of the world and stuff like that. But I feel like I wouldn't understand where the introverts come from. I'm not that introvert. But last semester I was very quiet. I was very to myself. So I can't agree with you in that type of way that that we don't think about what we want to say or that we're not as self-aware, because I don't think everybody has a push and pull when it comes to how extroverted or introverted you are. And I also feel like, I was trying to summarize it based on what you had last said, and I was thinking about what you're saying before. But I think that I do I'm repeating myself now. I lost my train of thought.
I get what you're saying.
But I reflect on a lot of what I say, and I do think about when you're talking in class and you're making a point about something, I do reflect and think a lot, especially, and I do care about what others think and how they feel, and I do pay attention to people's emotions and how they respond and such. So that's why I'm like, well, that's not necessarily true because we all are different and we all are.
It's not like a white. Think about it. So some of us may be introvert extroverts. You might get depends, right? And that could be the true nature. You're like, hey, I'm an extrovert in this situation. I get my energy, I get amped up, and then in another situation, you just want to be alone. I, for myself, I'm actually an introvert extrovert. I could talk to thousands of people. I always have been the same way since I was a kid. There's been nothing for me to talk to people or teach me. But at the same time, when I'm alone, I travel alone. I'll be with the bears remote. And people want to come with me on cool trips or that. I don't want to be by them. I want to be by myself. Why? Because I don't want to wake up when you wake up. I don't want to go do if you want to do it. I want to do something different. I don't want to do it. Right? So in a lot of ways, I go back into my shell as an introvert. But then I come back out and when I'm ready, interact. Yes.
I feel like the life that I live is very extroverted, but I prefer to be by myself. So for instance, I go to my classes and I have sports stuff, be with people all day. I go with my friends or my girlfriend. At the end of the day, I'm just kind of poop. And I'm just like, alright, this isn't bad. Just go to sleep and it's rinse and repeat,
Yeah. No, I don't think you have that happy though. Yes, but you're right.
You said exactly what I wanted to say.
Yes, it's not black and white. So we take this with a grain of salt, right? Each person is a complex, multi-dimensional, multi-layered organism. So this is just generalizing things, right? So don't take it personally, right? These are just generalizations, just for concept. Agreeableness, right? We kind of understand through research that women tend to be more agreeable than men, especially when it comes to social things, right? But we say, hey, the degree to which a person feels sympathy, kindness, and consideration towards other people. Example here is engage in environmentally friendly behavior, right? So we say agreeable. Right? It's more of a nurturing aspect, right? Kind of want to keep peace, right? Men tend to be lower on agreeability, which means that we tend to get into trouble. We may disagree with the laws. Right? I disagree with the way it is, I disagree with it. I'm going to break the law. I don't know. It's not my principle. Right? Hence why we're more incarcerated. We tend to say as with women. Like women will say the most important thing is the relationship of a team, a group, right? So it's about keeping the peace. Men, right, we're generalizing. We have a tendency to say if it doesn't make logical sense, we don't care about how you feel. Right? Things could break apart. We'll have to fight it out, duke it out, or something to that degree. So yeah, that's another personality of the big five. Neuroticism, emotional instability. How well a person copes with stress. Who's high on neuroticism? Alright, so think of neuroticism like this. As human beings, we're trying to predict the future, right? So we could either say the future is going to be negative. That way, when it happens and it's negative, we're okay with that. We expected it to be negative, right? And if it's positive, maybe we feel great about ourselves, right? That would be sort of neurotic thinking, neurotic behavior. Like, hey, I have a negative perspective about the thing that's going to happen next. Therefore, I'm stressed. Because the thing that's going to happen next is bad. It's negative, right? So I'm going to think about it and have ruminating thoughts, repetitive thoughts about relationships, schoolwork, an exam, tests, money, life, love, etc. So I'm stressed out. Why? Because it's all going to not work out for some reason. All right, so let's say who's high on neuroticism? Who's neurotic? Who's highly stressed? Why?
Thinking about the future, and there's a lot to worry about.
Right, it is, right? But then that notion, like, hey, well, it's outside of our control. The only thing that solves that is some mindfulness, some stoicism. It's out of your control, right? Some people may like take the predeterministic approach. Life was already written, and just characters and actors let it through. Look, it's already written. We're on a planet 65 million light years away, and we look at planet Earth through some ridiculous magnifying glass, we will see dinosaurs. Right? How does that make sense? Right? Because time is mainly an illusion. How could they see dinosaurs when it's 2025? That makes sense. Right? So some may say, hey, if it's a predeterministic universe, no matter what you think, what you're going to do is going to happen. Right, that might solve the neuroticism. It was going to happen. Right? Lastly, before we go, I'll tell you quickly. One of the greatest sort of philosophies ever. One of my greatest, most liked philosophers is Friedrich Nietzsche. Who's aware of Nietzsche? No one's ever heard of Nietzsche? One of the greatest philosophers of all time, right? He came up with Superman, what doesn't kill you and make you stronger, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, he says, he has a concept called amor fati, which means love or faith. He says, if you can reach to a point mentally to where you say you love your faith, you even love the horrible, atrocious, bad things that's happened to you and will happen, he said you would have reached some sort of mindset that very few people ever can ever reach. He says it's probably impossible, but that should be sort of a mindset, that you love everything that happens to you, even the horrible things, because it was going to happen anyway. For you to become an ultimate self towards the end of your life, how it was supposed to be. Right? Or you'd be stressed out. Oh my God, all right, everyone. We'll pick this back up on Thursday. Sorry we didn't get any blurbs, but everybody tried to come up with some blurbs on Thursday. We'll meet back in the old room Thursday. Hopefully they get that thing kind of situated. All right, have a great day.